investigation and the largest private bank in Russia. I want to bring in now CNN's senior political analyst David Gergen, political analyst Kirsten Powers, a columnist for USA Today, and Alex Burns, national political reporter for the New York Times. Also with us is former Congressman Jack Kingston, who was a former senior advisor to the Trump campaign. Good evening to all of you. Kirsten, I want to start with you. Your reaction to this FBI investigation and to this computer link between the Trump organization and the largest Russian bank.
I mean, I think there's a lot of smoke, but I don't know how much fire there is, frankly. I mean, we know that there were these communications and it looks strange, but at the same time, there's nothing illegal about the Trump organization communicating with a Russian bank. President Trump has said he hasn't done business in Russia, but that doesn't mean they couldn't want to do business in Russia, and people do that. So I think we need more information to know for sure whether or not something nefarious happened here.
And Alex, it is just another piece of the puzzle here about at least the communications between the Trump campaign, and it's still unclear what the big picture is here.
Right. I think a piece of the puzzle is exactly the right way to describe this. It's just piles and piles of question marks that we have at this point about all the interactions between either President Trump himself or people in his orbit and people who are associated with the Russian government or just live in Russia or have business relationships in Russia. That, you know, it's part of the political challenge that the administration has at this point, that because a number of them have not been entirely forthcoming about their contacts in Russia, there is this temptation to sort of see something hiding under every rock, when the reality is you can't really run business in the United States without having some contact with somebody who has some relationship with big foreign interests.
You know what might show that?
It's tax returns.
Some tax returns. I mean, am I wrong with that? Because listen, with that question, because we keep saying there's drip, drip, drip here, right? Everyone has said nothing has been established. But can the White House continue to say there's no there with this, even if it's?
No, they don't know either. The people are telling us that. You know, it really is sort of interesting, isn't it? Have we come to this? The Internet of Things is now a subject of investigation.
Right.
And most of us don't know the difference between a lookup and a hookup, you know? We're all saying, what is this language people are talking about? And so I think Kirsten is right. We know so little at this point that we shouldn't get too deeply in the weeds about the computers talking to each other, the servers talking to each other. What I do think is much more interesting is where you were going. And that is, for a long time, there has been a supposition here in New York in financial circles and legal circles that Donald Trump was not able to get funding during his career over the years. The funding from American banks began to dry up, and he turned to Russian banks and Ukrainian banks. And that's the reason that the trail leads to the tax returns, because with a private company, that's where you would find whether, in fact, he was paying interest to those banks or not. We don't know that, but that's the most interesting part of this.
Couldn't get funding because his businesses were not doing that well, by the way, and people were afraid to back him. Either the economy wasn't doing well, or they were afraid to back him because they didn't think his business deals were up to par.
There were some people who were afraid to back him for that very reason. There were others who felt, you know, he's already got to do business with for a variety of reasons.
Yeah. Congressman Kingston, yesterday Sean Spicer denied that there was an investigation. We heard that earlier. This is what he said today. Listen to this.
The Justice Department is saying, though, that they never gave you the assurances that you us.
Okay. No. What the assurance I gave you, Margaret, was that I'm not aware. And that is 100% accurate.
So when you said no reason to believe, it was I'm not aware.
That's right.
There's an investigation.
Right. I mean, I don't know that they're not interchangeable. I'm not aware. I don't believe. Look up in a thesaurus and find some other ways. But I don't know that there's a distinction there that's noteworthy.
So, Congressman, do you see that there's a problem here? The more the administration tries to clean up this mess, the bigger the hole that they keep digging here. What do you think they should do?
You know, I really don't. And I want to say this. I was at the White House, or at the old executive building right next to the White House, which is in the compound, yesterday, meeting with some people. And I was there last week. And it struck me yesterday as I was there, and I didn't know everybody, but I knew a few people, saw some familiar faces. But it struck me that, you know, here this administration is moving on, and the critics are still obsessed with this story. And I think the House Intel committees and the Senate Intel Committee is, you know, looking at this thing and doing what it needs to do. The FBI is doing what it needs to do. But meanwhile, the administration is moving health care You saw this great story today that on the border there's 40% decrease in illegal crossing. That's a big change under this administration. They're moving on tax reform, they're moving on infrastructure and so forth. So what I believe is that this just isn't the #1 issue. And so when Sean Spicer gets a question at it, he may be thinking about transportation and infrastructure or health care, some of the other things more pressing, which the White House is spending its time doing, which they were elected to do. And I underscore this because I think the critics, in their maybe eagerness to find something that this administration has done nefarious, and that's fine, that's what opposition parties do, but the reality is they're missing the bigger stuff.
Well, you know the old saying, no good news. There's a saying that I say that good news is no news, right? So I mean, we would do
That's
stories
true.
on birthday parties and squirrels on skis or whatever, but that's just not how this works. If there is a federal investigation, which our reporters found out, of course that's what we're going to cover. And had this president not tweeted out that the former president wiretapped him in relation to Russia, this story may not be to the magnitude that it is now. How can you disagree with that?
Yeah, also, I think, again, we have to go back to the context that we're getting all of this information in. And one of the biggest things is that one of the things that Democrats and Republicans were united on actually was that Russia is dangerous and is our enemy, and that Putin is a bad person. And whether you're a Republican or Democrat, pretty much everybody agreed on that. Along comes Donald Trump, and he has this completely different view. And so a lot of people, including Republicans, are asking why.
Well, and on top of that, I would just add that, to the congressman's point that, the administration is trying to get involved in pushing other kinds of major policy changes that President Trump campaigned on. That's absolutely true. And if they had handled the Russia issue differently going back to the end of the campaign and through the transition, if they'd been more forthcoming about a lot of the questions that people are asking now, they would probably have a clearer runway to deal with.
And if there's
things
no
like
there,
healthcare.
she said, listen, my business, and maybe his businesses didn't have it. We're just, speculating here. Maybe it had nothing to do with Russia. But if it did, he should say, there was a point when I could not get funding. I had to go to Russia, but there's nothing nefarious going on. I went where I could get the money, and that's it.